Welcome, everyone. Well, our next guest is someone that you know of, and she has pretty much lived most of her life in the public eye. She's also someone who has allowed us into her personal life before, and she's letting us do so again today. Alyssa Milano, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, and I want to kick off with, because one of the things that we've talked about a lot here during the pandemic is not only our physical well-being, but our mental well-being and mental health. And what's interesting is, and we're going to get into anxiety and mental illness overall, but you had COVID-19 months ago, and you're still feeling the impact of that. How are you doing? Tell me kind of where you are in this.
It's interesting. It vacillates. Some days I feel back to normal, and other days it's like I have a recurrence of the acute symptoms. I was sick with the acute illness for 5 weeks in March and April, and I have not felt back to normal since then. Some days I feel okay, but really it's just this incredible exhaustion. It feels like I have no motivation to physically move my body. And I don't know if that is some sort of mental protection or if it's my body trying to regenerate or what is happening. But I have shortness of breath, heart palpitations. My hair is still falling out. And I have the worst part, I have this ringing in my ears that is driving me bonkers. So, yeah,
Not great.
it has not been great. And it's interesting because of all my friends, I have quite a few friends that were sick. There's maybe 1 out of 12 that feels completely back to normal. The rest are just having these long hauler symptoms. And so, we find great comfort in each other, knowing that there are other people out there going through the same thing. And that makes a really big difference. And I think that makes a big difference in our mental health in general, just to know that there are other people, that go through similar things that we do.
Well, this is why we're so grateful that you're talking with us and talking about your own mental illness and talking about anxiety. And I want to take a few steps back, because from what I understand, just doing a little bit of research and watching some different things and some interviews you've done, you've dealt with anxiety for a long time. Is that fair?
Oh, yes. Yes, but I don't know that I had labeled it as anxiety, but my earliest recollection, and everybody experiences anxiety differently. For me, I get in a crisis mode that is very hard for me to break the pattern. And basically it gets to the point that my brain just thinks that's the way it's supposed to be functioning in fight, flight, or freeze. And I should also say is when we're talking about issues that affect the brain, we really prefer to talk about mental health, not mental illness. I think once we start calling it mental illness, that's when the stigma comes with that. And also to try to sort of be conscious of the phrases that we use, as far as like, I actually just did it and I caught myself, that the ringing in my ears was driving me bonkers. Like all of those things, all of those natural ways of describing things of the past, we sort of have to break out of, I think, in order to break the stigma. But my earliest recollection of being in crisis mode was I lived in South Africa for 3 months in 2000. And it was, only 9 years after apartheid was abolished. And I volunteered in a township in a children's hospital. And I was very strong while I was there. When I came home and had to assimilate like that part of me that volunteered and dedicated my time to helping other people and trying to assimilate that with the person that lived in Beverly Hills and drove a BMW, I had a very hard time getting back and getting acclimated. And And I went through about, and at this time I didn't know, but I would say 4 or 5 months of complete and total panic, anxiety. And for me, I have generalized anxiety disorder and I also get panic attacks. So what that basically means is my base level of anxiety is almost in a panic attack mode. And then my
Right.
panic attacks are sort of on top of that. So yeah, so I remember like I went to my general practitioner and I wasn't even in therapy, which by the way, there was anyone that needed to be in therapy, it was a child actor that
Yeah.
survived, right?
But
And
was there anybody around you? Was there anybody around you saying, wait a minute, Alyssa, this isn't right. You shouldn't feel this way chronically, and that would step in.
I mean, my mom was, well, I have a lot of the same characteristics as my mother. She suffers from anxiety. She also has
Mm.
dyslexia. I have dyslexia as well. So yes, she was encouraging me to go, but I went to my general practitioner and they put me on a very generic antidepressant, which made me, gain 15 pounds. And that was like a whole other issue. And plus I was
Right.
working 80 hours a week. I was working
Yeah.
on charm. And so it was very hard to take that sort of break and self-care.
I want to bring you forward a little bit because, from what I understand, it really became, I guess, very debilitating after the birth of your son Milo. Tell us a little bit about what happened. Right, you came home, and I know there were some complications or some stress just before he was delivered. Tell us what happened.
So I was in labor for 18 hours. I pushed for three
Mhm.
and a half hours, and he came to us via C-section. The birth itself and the labor itself was very traumatic. Not to get too graphic, but when a woman says she pushes for 3 hours, it is with the help of nurses who are basically trying to manipulate the baby while it's
Right.
still inside of your body to get the baby out. So for me, it felt incredibly invasive, and traumatic. And I think that it triggered my sexual assault trauma,
Hmm. Right.
because I
Right.
was sitting there and I was thinking, why does this feel like such a violation? Why is does not feel, and I don't think women talk about this um, at
And
all,
you're not in
right? I mean, I don't,
control, and it's right. You're not in control. It's a very tough situation, very heated.
and there's lots of people coming in the room and
Yeah.
plugging things in, and like, my mom used to joke, like, if they had a car in there, they'd be backing that in just to like, so that I think is what triggered my postpartum anxiety. And then
Right.
I felt better. My milk came in, I felt better. I had this beautiful little delicious baby. And it was when he weaned himself very suddenly without any like going down. My hormones were out of control. And
Right.
that's when my anxiety started to come back again, was when my hormone level dipped after he weaned, which was at 10 months. So then I
And
had this
you,
experience where go ahead.
no, no, no. I was going to say, you eventually found yourself in the ER room, right? In the wee hours of the morning.
Yes. But before that, the part of this story that I think is almost the most important is I went
Right.
into my OBGYN when this first started happening. And she looked at me and with a straight face, she said to me, well, it's a big life change. Go for a hike. Try to find some self care time. And
Yeah.
by the way, she said to me, you're 38 years old. So if you want to have another baby, we should probably start thinking about that. And I remember so clearly just being in tears. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not sure I want the baby that I have right now. And
Mm.
you're talking to
Right.
me about another baby? So I felt completely like the health care that I was getting was totally not where it should have been. So I would just go to the emergency room. I would go to the
Oh,
emergency room every time I felt like I couldn't deal.
well, and one of the times that you went, you actually had yourself committed, right, for 3 days.
I did. I did.
Why did you do that? Why
Uh,
did you do that? Why did you know you needed to do that?
so at the time I was working on Mistresses, which was a show on ABC, and I was still functional and I was still able to learn my lines and show up for work. And the thing about mental health, and when you're struggling with mental health issues, is you can't see it, right? Someone looks
Yeah.
completely together and healthy. And so I knew that the only way that I was going to get adequate care, that the production would understand that I needed to take time off,
Hmm.
only if, and I think women feel this in every industry, if they could see the severity. And I didn't think that there was a way for them to see the severity without going into a facility for 3 days. And I have to tell you, that experience really saved my life. And I had very little support. Like my parents, they're very supportive now, but at the time, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, because my mother had her own mental health issues, they were very
Right.
much of the school of buck up, get over it,
Well,
you're going to be
I
okay.
was I was going to say to you that I think so many of us think, well, I'm just stressed out right now. I'm overworked. I'm just worried. There's just too much going on in my life. And we tend to shrug these things off. Um, and
Yeah.
it's
I'm
something
not
that you actually
sure.
said that you didn't anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure the severity of what I was feeling. Excuse me, it's the truth.
Bless you.
Um, Thank you. I'm not sure that anyone could shrug off what I
Right.
was feeling and how severe it was. Um, Otherwise, I would have been the first one to shrug it off. So yeah, so very, very, very difficult time. But what happened was, is I went in and I started mapping out, when I was in the facility, I started mapping out when my anxiety came. And sure
Hmm.
enough, it always had to do with my cycle and always had to do with my hormone levels. So what this doctor that I saw there told me was, this happens to women. Nobody had ever said this before to me,
Right.
and he suggested that I go see this doctor that specializes in women's mental health and hormonal imbalances, and that
Right.
is still the team that I have to this day.
What do you think was the toughest part of this? Facing the illness, asking for help, working on a recovery, or was it all hard?
It was the feeling. The feeling. The rest of it, look, I've lived my entire life in the public eye. There was no way that
Yeah.
I wasn't going to share this part of who I am.
Yeah.
But the physical sensation of being in your body with, when you're struggling with mental health issues. And here's the thing, I had resources at my disposal.
Right.
I
Right.
could go to the emergency room. I had health insurance. I had people in my life. I had a job that I could take off from. The thing that terrifies me, and the thing that I understand, is when people are going through this alone, when single mothers are going through any mental health issue, or someone that doesn't have a supportive family, or doesn't have the resources to get help. That's when people self-medicate. That's
Right.
when people
That's
turn to drugs and alcohol.
or
That's
get
when
or give up.
people, or give up. And
Well,
so I think,
this is something I wanted to ask you because it's the Equality Summit. And what we do is we look at equality from so many different ways. The virus has reminded us, right, that people don't have equal access to health care. What do you think? And forgive me for doing this, but I'm just curious because you're educated about this, you've learned about it, you do understand that you were privileged in having great health care and access and support. But what would have happened? I mean, do you think if you didn't have all of that?
I don't think there was a choice. I had to have that. I had to figure out a way out. And for most people, the only way out is in, right? Is really
Yeah.
taking a deep dive. And I also want to say that there have been flare-ups since then, but I haven't been sick, the last 9 years there totally.
Right.
There were flare-ups, like when I sent out the Me Too tweet, and I started getting responses from women about their own sexual trauma. That triggered my sexual trauma, and how I had to sort of fess up
Yeah.
to the fact that I'd never really dealt with it, that I kept pushing it, and you cannot do that, because your brain will misfire, and I'm really, I think the message of equality and the message of women's health in this
Hmm.
conversation, independent of anything else. When you think about, certain cancers like ovarian cancer, and how there is no test for it, and it seems like there's no rush to find a test. These are the issues, the inequality that we face as women in healthcare, that goes beyond, sadly, mental health.
Well, well, and it's interesting that we're having this conversation. Here we are in a week where, the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and there are concerns about what that means for Obama's health care plans and what that means for women's rights. So, what you talk about is so, so relevant. I do want to ask you, and I have to say, anxiety and mental health issues are near and dear to me, and I have family and extended family members who struggle with that. Why is this so important that you use your platform to get this out to people, to talk about it, to share another very
Because
personal thing of your life? Yeah.
we have to get away from the fact that this is bad, or that there's stigma attached to it. I believe that seeing a mental health professional should be as common as going to the dentist twice a year for a health checkup, for a tooth health checkup. And by the way, that is how I'm raising my children. We call it, with my kids, we call it a feelings doctor. And they both
Mm.
have, a feelings doctor, where, you're going to go in to get your teeth cleaned, you're going to go in to get your vaccinations and your shot, and you're going to check in with someone who specializes in feelings, to know that what you're feeling in your heart is okay and is normal. And I think if we can erase that stigma and make healthcare more accessible to people who struggle with mental health issues, then I think we're going to be better for it as a society, and it's certainly a happier society.
I agree. And I don't want to, I'm all Bloomberg and I don't want to go all economic and productivity, but all of this, your physical health, your mental health, they all have an impact on your ability to live a really full life. And whether it's on your personal life or also in your workplace. I mean, these are costs if we want to go there, but there are costs to society by not doing this. I do wonder.
Absolutely.
I do wonder, is
Absolutely,
there
especially
anything?
when you think about, like, the fact that we don't have paid maternity leave, and how we don't
Right.
have early free childcare. I mean, women contribute a lot to this economy, and when we take those options away from women, what we're taking also away is for them to help with economic growth within our country.
Alyssa, as we get ready to wrap up this conversation, is there something you'd like to leave our group with that kind of gives you hope? Because as you say, it needs to be like going to the dentist and getting, your annual physical. Your mental health needs to be checked regularly. Is there anything that gives you hope?
Conversations like this give me hope. So thank you so much. My kids give me hope, in that we may be able to, in my family, break the cycle of, my grandmother hasn't left the house in 32 years. So
Wow.
my mission is, my mother has struggled. I have struggled. I'm going to give my children everything, all the tools that they possibly need to break this genetic, hereditary generational trauma, so that and I have hope that every family can do that, and I will continue to fight to make sure that people have access to healthcare, so that they can take care of their mind and their brain the same way you take care of your heart and your tummy.